right, we are here today with the team from The Inside, which is written by Lydia Diamond, but we will talk more about this writing process. It's amazing. And I'm going to let each person go around here and introduce ourselves. I am Kristen Osborn. I'm the Solo Voices Festival curator and producer, and I'm so delighted to be here today with this amazing team. Over to Lydia.
Oh, thank you, Kristen, for having us. It's an exciting project. And thank you, Tasia, for inviting me. And thank you, Amira, for being who you are and participating in this too. I have to say that I would only call myself the original writer of The Inside, because a beautiful thing about this piece that I know Tasia and Amira will continue to talk about is that it began as a play that I wrote for myself in college, but it grew into a play that then Tasia adapted that turned into hers, and then Amira adapted that turned into hers. So I see myself only as the beginning of where it took off from. I'm a playwright. I graduated from Northwestern in 1991. I used to teach at Boston University, where Tasia was actually a student of mine. And that was years ago. Yes, I'm sorry. Tasia's older than she used to be. And now I teach at University of Illinois, Chicago.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. Over to you, Tasia.
My name is Tasia A. Jones. I am a director and performer, and I am also an adaptor for this particular piece, The Inside, and also the current director of the piece. As Lydia mentioned, it has a long life. So I have previously been a performer of this piece, and now I am directing Amira.
Awesome. And then over to you, Amira.
Hi, I'm Amira Danan, and I am an actor and writer and adapter of this version, the newest version of The Inside. And I'm a recent graduate of Northwestern University, which is how I got connected with Tasia and with this project. We graduated at the same time. And yeah, so we've been working on it for, I don't know how long now.
Over a year.
Over a year. Yeah.
Tasia, did you say the part about how you graduated from Northwestern with a what? What was your degree?
Oh, MFA in directing. So a little bit of history and context. I met Lydia at Boston University when I was an undergrad there. And Lydia was teaching playwriting, and I think I only audited a class with Lydia. I don't even think
Is that true? Well, let's lie to people and tell them that you learned everything you knew from me.
I learned, but I still did. And we've had a long relationship as friends and collaborators throughout the years since then. And when I was a senior at BU, I was struggling to find something to do for my thesis. And Lydia, approached me with this play, The Inside, and said, I have this play. I did this when I was, tell me if I'm getting this wrong, Lydia, too, that you did this when you were an undergrad?
I did, and since you buffered
at Northwestern?
Yeah, you were buffering for a second, but now you're not, so.
Oh, did you get all of that?
Yeah.
And so when I was a senior, Lydia sort of gifted me this play, and I ended up performing it. I adapted it with her, reworked it, made it my own, and then performed it as my senior thesis at BU. And since then, I have, worked on it throughout the years and performed it.
Do you remember that? I did direct it.
Yes, Lydia directed it as well, and she was my thesis advisor. And then I went to Northwestern to get my MFA in directing, and I met Amira there. And it just became clear to me that it was time to sort of pass on the play, and that Amira was the person I wanted to pass on to. And she's a wonderful writer and performer. And so it seemed like the perfect person to continue adapting this work and make it her own. So that's where we are, and that's what we're doing now. And the hope is that, this play continues to be paid forward right? So that Amira will one day, she will make it her own, she will perform it as long as she likes, and then one day she will pass it on to the next woman of color that she chooses.
Who's alienated at an institution. What? I'm sorry, huh? What?
What? And that's what this is about, right? Is paying it forward and letting all of these voices come together in this play. And now there are 3 different voices combined into this one character, Emma Shepherd, and it's a really interesting project.
It's so cool. Yeah. And I mean, my question is, because it has this unique backstory and really cool evolutionary journey, where did this come from for you originally, Lydia? And then Tasia and Amira, when you're talking about putting yourselves into the play, like, what does that process look like and what does that mean?
Well, I sort of jokingly said, it's a story about many things. It's a coming of age story. It's well, you know what? I won't do that. I won't impose what it is, because I bet it's something different for all of us. But I will say that when I wrote it, it was coming off of the experience of being one of only a couple of non-white theater majors at Northwestern, where I didn't at that time either have Black instructors. My playwriting instructor was the person who, Charles Smith, who's a great mentor and friend, was the only person who was there, and he came in and taught playwriting, and then, he was more than an adjunct and less than a faculty member. I don't know what his title was. And so this was very much a play that was about me processing sort of the pain of the level of alienation that I had felt, and also me providing myself something to do, because there really kind of wasn't, in many ways, a place for me as an actor at Northwestern, which is an amazing institution and taught me a lot of great things that I know, but was also a very difficult at that time for me place to be. So when I went to Boston University, when I was teaching there, and I was the only person of color on the faculty, and Tasia was one of, how many African Americans would you say there were?
3.
Yeah, one of 3 in the whole program. I'm talking about, and I'm not just talking about in her class, but in the whole department. It was heartbreaking to me, because that was 20 years since my, having graduated, and that things hadn't changed, and that I was the only person of color on the faculty at BU, also a fine theater school. I found tragic. And so we were talking about, we had one thing that was great about BU is we were very much aware of and invested in the students' education. And we were talking about, what will the various students do for their things? Where will we put Tasia? What will she do? And it was making me crazy. And I was like, I know exactly what she could do. Oh, well, we don't usually have, yeah, but that's what we're gonna do. And it was striking to me how much of her story overlapped with my story 2 decades later.
Yeah, and that was the thing for me. As soon as I read it, I was like, this is my experience. It felt so true to me. And I had the same experience that Lydia talked about in her undergrad experience, being one of 3 students of color, and I mean of any color. There were Black students, and that was it. Yeah, in the whole program at the time. And from what I've seen, their recruitment process is much better now. And but at BU, it was always like, well, where are we gonna put her? And I felt that, I was getting, I was just in the ensemble. I was never like able to have any meaty roles, and I felt like I was just biding my time until I graduated. And then I had this opportunity.
I mean, it should be, Zoom is not a good medium for interrupting people, and I'm not a good medium for not interrupting people, so I'm sorry, but I want to add that Tasia is a wonderful actor, as well as being a very smart director. for me at Northwestern, you know, I was an okay actor, but there was no gray area around Tasia's being spear carriers for too long. Okay.
Thank you. And I was literally a spear carrier, I believe, in Troilus and Cressida. So I jumped on it. I was like, I definitely want to do this. And Lydia directed it, and one of the other 3 Black women in the program stage managed it. And, you know, it was a really deeply wonderful experience for me. It was the first time that I had been able to perform and feel like I was actually able to dig into my craft and like do real work as an actor. And that's what I was in school for, you know? And also I was telling my story, and I was telling Lydia's story, and I was telling the story of like every other Black girl who'd like gone through these programs or been in a white institution. And it felt really good. And so, you know, the play has evolved from there a little bit because, you know, once I graduated, and it wasn't about like being in undergrad, you know, it was about the post-collegiate experience. And then like, what is it like to still live in that world, in a mostly white world, outside of college, and like making friends once you don't have, you know, the confines of school to bring you together, and how do you find where you fit. And then once I was at Northwestern, I was like, oh, this is where Lydia wrote it. And I'm here now. And like, I'm seeing the same sort of things play out, you know, in 2018, you know, and there were a handful of Black students in the program, much larger program than BU, right? So there's what, 400 students, Amira, in the theater program, like total, right?
And now how many of color? I mean, roughly.
I was about to say still not enough. I mean, I think in my year, probably, I mean, less than 10 every year. So
that means they gained 3 decades, 2 decades. Yeah. What would the math on that be? Wow.
Yeah, okay. And the percentages still not good when you're talking about 400 students, right? In the theater program. And not all of them are actors, right? Some of them are, you know, in other parts of the theater world, exactly. Mm-hmm. But it was clear that like, this institution still needs this play, right?
Which I find heartbreaking. I find heartbreaking. It's hard to listen to now. It's hard to experience. Being someone who, in all of the years since that play, you know, I've tried aggressively in the world of theater to lend myself as a voice to speaking to it and trying to in some way have an impact. And it makes me slightly crazy that that would have been Tasia's undergrad experience and Amira's undergrad experience. And I think this play beautifully articulates that. And I also have appreciated, like, Tasia, the things that you changed and made yours made the play better, you know? And that was exciting. And then when I saw yours, Amira, I was like, wow. And you added another dimension.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So
and Amira's, when you'll get a chance to hear a little snippet of it, Amira added all of this poetry that is so beautiful, and all of this imagery that wasn't there before. And so the play is really hers now. It's really hers.
Yeah, and I think for me, definitely when I received it, I was also surprised at how many things still resonated, which, yeah, is sort of upsetting, because it's like, why do they still resonate that much? And I think actually for me, like I didn't grow up with any diversity around me. So growing up in Oregon, I was in like an all-white community. So actually when I got to Northwestern, that was unfortunately like the most diverse place that I'd ever been.
Yes, I understand.
And so I think for me, it was not only like going to Northwestern, but then realizing that that diversity that I at first thought was so well-rounded quickly became, you know, not, it had a lot to be desired, or like more to be desired than I thought. So yeah, I think just going to Northwestern and having those realizations that even though you're at a liberal institution that does have diversity, you know, to some extent, that, you know, things have changed. There's still microaggressions, which I think is something that's sort of not newer, but, you know, a change in the way that you receive sort of like racialized comments.
You know what, Amira? It's even less than that, but that it got a name.
Yeah.
You know, it got named, and it got named in the New York Times, and then it was a thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And so being able to sort of like instill the piece with that and how it's sort of developed in, you know, today has been really interesting too.
And I'm curious for Lydia and for Tasia now, as you watch Amira make this piece, what are there surprises? I mean, you talked about some of the poetry, but are there other things that are popping out to you now?
It taught me about, it made me question deeply what art is for and what theater is for, and challenged me to the core about releasing, right? If we're making theater to go into the world, you know, I often say in panels, yeah, you know, people will be like, oh, theater is for us all to, you know, make what we will. And someone will say like, yeah, what if, you know, your play Stick Fly, we cast it with all white people? And I will say, no, I mean, maybe when I die, but I'm not gonna have it. And so for a playwright with that paradigm, it was beautiful to be made aware that there's another way that art can happen. And it was humbling because the play kept getting better. And by the time Amira had it and you added all of this beautiful, you did a thing that, like, if I had been developing it, if there was such a thing as development when I wrote it, I still wouldn't have gotten there because I'm not a poet, but it's almost like you brought it home. Like, I don't know if you handed it to the next person, if I would be inclined to want them to do very much to it, because you made it something that was very beautiful and more whole than it had been.
Yeah, it makes me wonder how far it can go, and also the need for it, right? There's a part of me that's like, oh, maybe like if we're lucky, we won't need this play anymore. We won't need to like pass it to the next person, because the next person won't be having the same experience and needing to tell that same story. And so as much as I want it to keep moving forward, I also don't, because it means that, you know, that story is still resonating for the next generation and the next generation. But yeah, as far as the changes, I think what's really interesting about the play now is that there are pieces that are very distinctly of one of us, right? There will be a story that is very much mine, or a story that is very much Amira's or Lydia's. And then there are pieces that are so very blended now, right?
Yeah.
That really are combining all three of those voices coming together. And one of the most interesting things about this version, I think, is Amira's identity, right? Amira's identity as a multiracial woman, right? Who is experiencing what it is to be in a lighter skinned body as a Black woman, right? And what that layers on to her experience, right? And now Emma's experience of the world, and how she interacts and relates to these white women that she is encountering. And so that's a really interesting piece that, like, I could never contribute, you know, to the play. And that is very much an added layer that's coming into the story now.
Yeah, and I think we talked about during our rehearsal earlier that it just makes all of these people and their experiences who created this make Emma's character that much more complex, because I think none of us could have written such a complex character on our own, you know, on a first try.
Yeah.
But I think now that, you know, like her family's from Morocco, because that's where my family's from, you know, she's queer, like we've created all of these identities and put them all together based on our experiences. And I think that just makes Emma's character that much more multi-dimensional.
I would love to see what would happen to it in the hands of someone who is like Asian American or Latinx or white but transgender, or, you know, it'd just be so interesting. It is interesting to see, and it would be. I mean, did you find, Tasia, that when you heard Amira's, there were times when you were like, oh, Italy's gone? Like, but it
wasn't gone.
It wasn't gone, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
like,
it was important.
Yeah, of course.
Did
There
you
were
ever
things
feel
that
that way?
that's really interesting. As you hand a play off, right? And maybe this happened for you too, Lydia. You can tell me if this happened for you too. But there, you know, Amira would be like, I want to change this section, and yeah, I did feel like, oh killing my darling. Like, that's like a piece of me. But at the same time, like, you know, it was like, no, well, the play is hers now, and I'm giving it over. And you know, there were negotiations to be made about, you know, structure and about maintaining the essential integrity of the story and like what it wants to be, right? But in terms of individual stories and like wanting to cut a piece here so we can add another layer there, all of those compromises that I had to make in terms of like, oh, that's my story. Yeah, it was hard at first. And then it was like, no, but that made it better. You know, actually the story was too long.
Did it make you, was it scary to you to know that you were writing and changing someone else's very personal experiences?
Yeah, totally. I think that especially when at first I would try and detect like what was yours and what was Tasia's, and I would be like, oh no, I'm changing too much of Lydia's. Oh no, I'm changing too much of Tasia's. But then eventually I was like, I just need to throw that out the window and just like focus on the piece like for what it is. And I feel like the compromises that we made, they allowed us to have conversations about, you know, why we thought something was so important. So I feel like, you know, when Tasia felt like something in the Italy story was really meaningful to her, we had the conversation about, you know, why that was. And usually I would agree if I felt like that needed to be there. So I think it let us talk about, you know, the reasons we valued certain parts of the story.
I wonder if every time we do it, it becomes easier for the next person, because I'm curious to see. No, Tasia, I had to sit on myself hard and bite my tongue until it bled to try to give you room. And I don't know if I was even very good at that. Was I okay with that?
I think so. I think there's a lot of me in there, and I think that speaks to how good you were about letting me, you know, give me space to put myself in there.
It was painful, and everything that you added was beautiful. And it stopped being painful somewhere like 3/4 through the rehearsal process.
Yeah.
But it did. It was like, it felt wholly unnatural for someone to write on my thing. What is she doing? I mean, I told her she could do it, but what is she doing? Right. Wait, where did that go? What? You know. So.
Right. Well, and then on a technical level, I mean, are you thinking in process, Amira, as you're now like going through and chiseling away at this or adding this, are you thinking about like, oh, we want to keep it at about this length, or, oh, you know, because what's to keep someone from just adding a huge, adding until it gets to be so enormous, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think at first I didn't really have any awareness of that, and then we added so much, and then I was like, wait, this is long. So I think at first I think it was good that I didn't have too much awareness of the technical, because that allowed me to, you know, be creative about it and add what I felt like needed to be there. And then later comes, you know, the whittling down if it needs to happen. And I think, how long is it now? Maybe like an hour or something?
It's still maybe just barely an hour.
Yeah,
you know,
so I feel like that's a good length.
You did it in one act or two?
Yeah.
Did you have an intermission?
Nope.
Oh. Yeah, just went through it.
I think it could be as long as somebody made it that would be good.
Yeah, totally. And I think you still want to like capture their attention and make sure they're in the story, and, you know, you don't want to be in it forever either, because it's a lot for one person to be doing. But I think that we got it to a length where it feels like it has its cycle. And I feel like it feels good where it is, at least for now.
Yeah.
So cool. And is there someone that you think you would pass it on to, or are you at this point, is it so yours and you're holding it? And like what is that process? When do you let it go on to the next person?
That's a good question. I don't think I know yet. I think I still have a lot of work that I want to do on it. And we did a sort of like workshop reading at the end of my senior year at Northwestern. And so that was the only time that I've really ever performed it in any way.
Which looked like a performance. You were so good. It was
a performance. Yeah.
I told her she was like, what is that called? She was like a ringer because she had the script.
She never used it.
She was not looking at that script.
She just wanted it for me. And I was like, we can make this a workshop reading, but she was totally just doing a performance. And it was great.
I just wanted this there so I could like know that it was there,
I understand.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I used to like take tests in school, I would like have a notebook in my bag, like with all my notes from the class. And I would be like, it's okay. I know it. The notebook's in my backpack. So I think it just made me feel better, but it was a performance. And then I think after that, I took a step back from it for a few months, and now I'm sort of returning to it and returning to work on it. And this is a great time to do that.
Did you guys perform it? I feel like there was or was that in Boston? Was there a performance in a professional place?
I performed it in Boston.
Yeah.
I did a full production of it in Boston.
But you haven't, Amira, yet, have you?
No. Yeah, the last
we'll have to make that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, right. And ultimately in, Solo Voices, we will do an in-person public reading at Rivendell. But at this point, we just don't know when that'll be. Yeah, that's the sad, it will happen.
We hope. Maybe
but
we'll wear masks while we do it, or maybe the next generation will be like, what do you mean eating hummus out of the same
right. Right. Yeah.
I mean, but this is the perfect kind of show to do post COVID, right? It's one person on stage by herself,
She can stand as far back as she wants.
Short and sweet.
Right.
At least.
Totally.
I hope is that you take this and spend some time with it before you pass it on. That you allow yourself to spend some time with it.
Organically. Like I think I performed that piece for a few years after graduating college. I remember we went on tour with it with Impact Theater Company. At one point I had a version of it that had other people in it. But it wanted to be with me for a few years, and it was very organic when I gave it to Tasia. So I think it'll happen without Amira, without you having to massage that. I think it's just going to happen one day.
Yeah, and I think I'm not sure if I've met the person yet, but I think I'll know.
You'll know.
Well, just as I knew, I would say the same thing happened very organically.
I don't at all think it would be tragic if it ended with you, but it won't.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. This has been such an enriching, wonderful discussion, and we're so excited to eventually get back to seeing it in its full iteration. But I just want to thank you all so much for taking the time to do this.